Afternoon, everybody. How you doing? Just making a wee video, a wee update. Just under a week to go till Kilimanjaro now. Can't believe it. It's coming round fast. But just making something slightly different today. I'm making over the next week. I'm going to make 3 videos, telling the story basically of my story of how I became in this fortunate position to be going on an adventure like this and a challenge like this next week, which I'm really looking forward to, but really nervous about as well. But I'm going to tell the story where I'm getting to here. I'm going to make 3 videos over the course of the next week. This being the first one. Focusing on this video today. I'll be where I think it went wrong in the army. And how my army career came to an end, which still to this day I think about all the time, and how it could have been handled so much better on both parts, obviously. And then from leaving the army to ending up pretty much homeless with nowhere to go. And then I'll make a video next week about my recovery and reaching out for help and all that, and how it's got to where I am today, which is amazing. Anyway, here goes. So the first video, I'm going to start it for when I returned from Afghanistan on my first tour, which was in 2007. And then after that tour, we had our post-op leave, and which tied into Christmas leave as well, if I remember rightly. And when we got back to Watersham, I was at the squadron for about another 2 or 3 weeks, and then with short notice, I was attached out to 29 flight in Canada, in Battis, which was all brilliant, and I enjoyed my first tour, and I enjoyed Canada even more. But that meant that I was pretty much away from home life in Falkirk or seeing any of my family for about a year in total. And I got back for Canada, and it was Christmas leave 2008. I went straight on that. I was a bit late back, and then and when I got back, it was clear that my family. I won't go into detail on that, but my family was having issues at home. And I seen this as I needed some compassionate. I asked for some compassionate leave when I was at home during Christmas leave, and this was refused right away. And I was needed back at the squadron, which I didn't see how, but it put me in at a crossroad. Well, in an awkward position, because on one hand I wanted to stay and support my family, mainly my mum at home. Although my leave had been refused, I made the decision, which was it's never the right decision. Well, it's never the right decision, to be honest. I never went back to camp, so I therefore became AWOL, and after Christmas leave in January. And initially I thought if I stay at home, support my mum with what's going on for a couple of weeks, I'll then go back to the regiment and face the music. But I didn't want to face it. 1 week turned into 2 weeks, 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and then I was AWOL for 6 months, which is not good. And they say things happen for a reason. The reason I ended up going back in the end that gave me an edge. When I was AWOL, I was working I got a job. I was working on the side, making money, because the army was no longer paying me, and it was awkward. I shouldn't have been doing what I was doing, but as I say, I was scared to go back and face the music. I knew I was in trouble, and this turned into, before I knew it, 6 months. But I loved the army as well, and when I did eventually go back, they say things happen for a reason. I broke my leg one day So I could no longer work on the side, and it gave me the push I needed, I think, to therefore make contact with my squadron, who were good with me at the time. When I got contact with them, they met me at the train station because I couldn't carry my stuff because my leg was in a full cast and I was on crutches. But I eventually made that contact and went back. I've got some notes. And then, so I made it back to Free Rage after being AWOL for 6 months. I was moved to HQ Squadron from 662. And on my return, obviously some people were good with me, others were bad. My first impression when I thought they're not having me here is with my leg in a full cast. The QM at the time put me on the furthest room possible from work, and on the third floor with my leg being in a full cast and on crutches. I don't know if this was coincidence or if it was just, I was told it was the only available room on the camp. So, but who knows? Yeah. And after a while, I started, well, after a few days, I was back and working in the SQ Mace department, and then the decision was obviously made to court-martial me. It was always going to be court-martial, which I knew was there, and I was fine with that. That's what was going to happen. And I was assigned an assistant officer. I can't remember the correct term for it, but it's like your defence lawyer, basically. We had about a month to prepare. We got on really well. I told him the reasons for going, and he was fully supportive, and he believed me, which was massive in my mind, and it gave me the confidence that my army career could be restored, because I didn't want to leave the army at all. So we worked on this plea of mitigation for about a month and got it where it should be there. But my first inkling that the powers that be didn't want me to continue in the regiment was when less than 24 hours before my court-martial, my defence person, my assistant officer, was changed with less than a day's notice to who was then, I think, 7 Battalion Remies RAO. No offence to them, but it was someone I'd never met, never spoke to, and we had about half an hour before my court-martial, because I couldn't see them until the day of my court-martial. So when I was there, just before my court-martial, for instance, she asked me, "How do you pronounce my surname?" And this gave me no confidence, and I was resigned to being discharged. I thought there was no hope. However, at Colchester, when I was court-martialed, I was sentenced. I was sentenced to the maximum possible sentence at the time. The judge at the time said, "I sentenced you to 6 months in Colchester in the glass house, and you'll be reduced to the rank of air trooper and on an 18-month promotion ban." But they were keeping me in the army, so I was over the moon. I was chuffed for this. But the only reason the judge says the overriding factor was having read the plea mitigation that myself and my previous assistant officer wrote. I don't know if he's on the Rovey page or that might be, but you'll know. Is what kept me in the army. I was pleased with this, but I was later, when I was in Colchester, someone visited who was in the know of what was going on at the camp, and unbeknownst to me, the CEO at the time had tried to appeal my decision to get me discharged again, but was unable to do those. And that was the end of that. I served my time in Colchester. I actually really, as weird as it sounds, I enjoyed Colchester and the routine and the structure and the fitness and all that sort of thing. and I came out probably what I thought a better soldier. And then I was out for I went to HQ Squadron Free Reg when I came out, which was fine, good way, because had a brilliant OC at the time. It was Dave McGee. So I'm not naming everybody's names, but Dave McGee was my OC at the time, and Jim Lyons, 2IC, Andy Payton was the Sergeant Major, and they were all absolutely brilliant with me. And in the end, I ended up getting my promoted, Captain Major McGee at the time, sorry, got me my rank back within 6 months. And then I went on to, not long after that, go on tour with 663 Squadron to Afghanistan. I had a brilliant tour, but it had always been in my head that I was now at my 11-year point, and I'd just got my Landstrak back, and this could have all been avoided, I think, if I was shown a bit of compassion after doing everything that the army had asked me for 9 years previous, without getting in trouble. But that wasn't the case, and it's hard. It was hard to take. And then, whilst I was out on this tour to Afghanistan, I just thought, with time served, where my career was going, I thought it was the time to leave. Probably out of stubbornness to myself, because I couldn't get my head round it. But I made that decision, which was hard. So I come back from Afghanistan, and within 6 months I'd left the army. I was discharged, and if I was to give a piece of advice to any serving officers, is no soldier wants to get in trouble. They don't want to get in trouble, and if you can look behind the crime, like look beyond the crime as to why it's happening. My only concern was my family, which anybody would be the same. And yeah, and I have very little doubt that I'd have completed my 22 years in the army had I got compassionate leave and never went down that rabbit hole, because I was a good soldier and I was promoting quick through the ranks. I was doing well. So it's just having that, if I was to give any advice to anybody, it would be having that know-how just to look beyond the crime and look at the reasons for it happening, because I've no doubt I'd have done my 22 years after that. And I'm not blaming anyone for like me leaving the army. I'm just because it was my decision to go EWO. It was my decision, and then after what's happened after the army, it was all me. But this is something that I still think about to this day, what could have been and what would have been. But anyway, that takes us up to me leaving the army, and then I hope that makes a bit of sense to everybody. I mean, I'm not the best at speaking, but there you go. Anyway, thank you.